Hello folks, my name is Ann Purvis and I'm one of the leaders of the Toronto Field Naturalist Juniors program. This is the time of year for observing trees. They're so visible against the sky, mostly without their leaf canopy. We had a lot of participants send in photos this week of some interesting feature about trees, so we're going to start out with those. This photo was taken by Alexi, and it reminded me of the principle of photography, of nature photography, that Sienna taught us last week, which is that triangles draw the eye. And so I challenged the group to see how many triangles they could see in this photo, and there are literally dozens. The group was able to guess that these were things that had fallen from ginkgo tree. Ginkgo is a very ancient tree. The leaves look like they're formed from needles that are pressed together. Dioecious means that there are male and female trees. And so ginkgo trees are dioecious, meaning that only some trees produce the fruit. And the female tree doesn't produce fruit until it's 20 years old. A tea made from the leaves is supposed to help with memory loss. Asian folks also eat the nut inside the fruit after toasting it, but it isn't wise to eat too many of those. This tree is tamarack, and it is the only evergreen tree we have to lose its leaves. It has these tiny little pine cones here. We grew to love this tree. We planted this tree on our property 30 years ago, and it did incredibly well. But porcupines loved the bark and chewed it every year. We found it to be incredibly resilient. It bounced back year after year after being chewed. If it is a hard winter and the porcupines chew right around the trunk, then the tree can't recover. This was something I noticed, and I challenged the group if they could see what's going on in this video. This is a video of two vines climbing extremely high in the air and twisting around each other. And they climbed so high, they got right up into the very highest part of the canopy of the forest. And here, this is the tree, the trunk of the tree that whose branches they were able to support themselves on. So one of the vines was bittersweet and the other was grapevine. A lot of our participants noticed bracket or shelf fungus this past week. Shelf fungus are the woody fungi that grow on living or dead trees and are very tough. They have pores underneath instead of gills. So this one on the left, I believe, is artist conch. This is one that people harvest, and because it has a very smooth undersurface, it's possible to draw a picture on it. And this one on the right is Ishnoderma resinosus. And the term resinosus means juice or resin, and this fungus produces a red juice in the spring. I challenged the group if anybody could remember what is the job of fungi in the ecosystem. There are two substances that make wood hard, cellulose and lignin. Bracket fungi can break these down and get energy out of them. Almost nothing else in nature can use these for energy. Some fungi eat lignin and some eat cellulose. Often there is a fungi for each associated with a particular type of tree. Insects, mammals, and mites will feed on the bracket fungus, which has eaten the wood of a particular tree. As I was researching bracket fungus, I found there's a whole community of people who harvest these for food and medicine. This is good for conservation, that there are people who are interested in living things for all different reasons. So, for example, Ishnoderma resinosus can be harvested early in the season when it is tender, and then you just use the outer edge and saute it. The only thing we have to remember is that other living creatures also eat fruiting bodies of fungi, even though they are just fruit, and the mycelia are still inside the tree to produce more shelf fungus it's important to remember that some creatures rely on them for food. So this is birch polypore, an old ones actually. They're a little bit shriveled. People collect these when they are young and cut them up and dehydrate them in their dehydrator, then brew them in their slow cooker. And the juice that comes off of them has anti-cancer and antibacterial properties. And these are two different red belted polypores. So it fruits on logs and stumps. It has a distinct red edge here. The new growth is red and then it darkens with age. This can be confusing when you're trying to identify it. So many uses. It's sometimes used as a tinder or to carry fire, as a coal. Native folks smoked it to relieve headaches. And as a powder, it can be cut. It can be spread on a cut because it has clotting power. It can be cut, dried, and turned into soup or tea, and it has antiviral, antibacterial, and anti-inflammatory powers. So it has been used to treat arthritis. This on the left is dryad saddle. It grows on elm wood, and many elms have died in Ontario from Dutch elm disease, so this has become very common, this fungus, and it can be eaten early in its life, and it tastes like watermelon. This one over here is a bracket fungus, but it's lying on its back. It's unusual. It looks like a tooth fungus, but actually the little tubes, it is a regular bracket fungus with tubes, but the little tubes split apart and look like teeth. So these are two mushrooms. Mushrooms are not something that we should ever eat because it is very difficult to distinguish the ones that are edible from those that are poisonous. So this one here I believe is tricholoma, and this one is Dryophilus. Both of these are common. The gray cap has scales on it if you look very closely, and that gave me a clue to its identity. Dryophilus fruits under conifers, and tricholoma fruits under both hardwoods and conifers. So we had a discussion in the group about what might have been the cause of these different openings here in the wood. This is an interesting case of where the heartwood of the tree is actually exposed. The only part of the tree that is alive is actually the outer rim, the cambium layer, which is just underneath the bark, so it carries water up to the leaves and sugar down to the roots. The inner core, and then at the end of the season, the cambium layer dies, which forms one of the rings of the heartwood, and a new cambium layer comes into existence. So the whole inner part of the tree is actually already dead, even though it's alive. And you can see the little holes here where the wasps and beetles have gotten in and digested the wood. And so I'm guessing that something has been trying to go after the bugs that are in this wood, maybe a raccoon or skunk or something like that, or a weasel. And this one over here, someone guessed probably this is a chipmunk hole, and I just think it's a very clever location for a chipmunk hole because there's no footprint left on the moss that surrounds the hole, so it's actually a really smart way to camouflage the activity of the animal. And these were also damage to trees, so we discussed the fact that this one here is probably done by a woodpecker who was going for the heartwood and went deep into the tree. This seems to have little teeth marks on it, and I'm guessing that it was done by a porcupine, which they are vegetarian, so they only eat the cambium layer. And many weeks ago we talked about the fact that these galls are made by a bacteria that lives in the soil, and it gets into the tree through the xylem when it's taking up water. So I challenged the group to see how many different birds they could count on our feeder. This bird feeder is called a Yankee flipper, and when squirrels like to run along this fence behind it, but when they try to jump onto this ring to get at the feed, the ring starts to spin. So this is a red elderberry tree, which the birds love to sit in this, and they sort of observe who's at the feeder, and I guess whether it's a good opportunity for them to join. Squirrels don't like being flipped off the feeder, so they only try it once. So this is a red-breasted nuthatch. House sparrows, male and female, have been visited. And then finally we have the cardinal. I find this interesting. He's able to manipulate that seed and spit out the shell. So we decided there were 5 different species there: white-breasted nuthatch, red-breasted nuthatch, chickadee, house sparrow, and cardinal. And our final picture today was from Sandra, Alexi, and Sienna, and it's a picture of wild turkeys on their property. Wild turkeys, apparently, we just noticed how beautifully they're framed in this photo, which was another one of the principles of good nature photography that Sienna outlined for us. So in winter, male turkeys hang out in a group, and female turkeys who have raised the young seek out other females who have young as well, and they also group together. So they're not super good flyers, but they'll sometimes roost in trees, and they hop up to the lower branch and then hop up to the next branch.